All right, here we go. Friday night, and I think I accidentally started a little late. I do apologize for that. It's 9:32 p.m., but regardless, we'll catch you up just in the nick of time before we hit our first break. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Friday night to join me here in the Digital Weather Center. I'm meteorologist David Nazario, standing in this evening for meteorologist Jonathan Kegges, getting some much-needed rest. He's taken a comp day tonight for the hard work he put in during a winter weather bout a number of weekends ago. And I really do think, to kind of segue us into some of the topics tonight, winter weather in Florida anyways is probably going to be a thing of the past until potentially this time next year. If not, I should say November, December, when fall and winter come back around. But let's take you outside right now, get a look at the radar while I say hello to a few folks. Chat is popping this evening. It's great to see everybody. We've got a fairly active radar presentation for you tonight, and I think that's where we're going to spend the first 5 or so minutes of the stream here, just kind of dissecting what's happening outside, because we've got a pretty generous rainfall setup in play for the Florida Peninsula, which is outstanding news. As one of our faithful viewers, Melissa Riley, mentioned in the chat not too long ago over on our YouTube channel, this is going to help to dent the drought ever so slightly. It's not going to do, all sorts of repairs. It's not going to completely eradicate it altogether. But this is probably one of the more healthy rainfall setups we've seen in the Florida Peninsula since this winter, and even arguably since the fall season kicked off last year in the months of September and October, once La Nina absolutely dominated the pattern across the tropical Pacific and kind of gave us the background, or the bones, the skeleton of what the fall and winter season would look like. We kind of saw this coming not 1,000 miles away, but 3,000 miles away. And I got to fully agree with 16 Medic RN. First of all, plugging in some very quality information. There is going to be, let me scroll up on the chat so I can get the information right. Let me see here. Where did your message go? There will be a veterans stand down tomorrow at the Seminole County Department of Health, where they'll be performing dental checks, showers, jobs, and legal aid. As a fellow veteran and current service member myself, this resonates with me. So if you do happen to know any veterans out there, whether you're watching tonight live or after this live discussion has concluded, please try to look out for some information. If you could, Medic RN, drop in the chat where some folks could get some information. That would be beneficial and very helpful. So let's take you full screen. Enough with the rambling before I accidentally push us right into our first break. Right now, the only areas I'm going to continue to watch are right on in. Whoops, let me go ahead and grab the pen there. There it is. I got a little ahead of myself. It's going to be right in this quadrant of our viewing area, from the Titusville, Rockledge area, south of Orlando. I'll go ahead and etch Orlando out. And we're going to be looking mainly in Polk and Osceola, as some of the more stronger cells out there continue to move off towards the east. The reason I say that is we still have some leftover outflow from some of our earlier thunderstorms, a little bit of a shallow layer of air that's still moving around out there. We can't quite see it on this radar, but that's essentially what I've been tracking for the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 hours now, ever since we started to see some of our stronger stuff blossom out there. As those updrafts take their deep breath in and then exhale, let all that air out down where we are at ground level, now we're starting to see these conflicting boundaries out there in very localized instances, and that's where we continue to see stuff flare up, because we are well past the warmest portion of the day, well past where we're actually going to be able to tap in any of that energy that built up during the warmest portions of the afternoon. It did get fairly warm out there too, low to mid 80s across the viewing area, and that's precisely why this rainfall setup managed to perform as well as it did. Tomorrow, in fact, in that same area that I'd highlighted, right in through here, it's kind of interesting for us Central Floridians, right there, I will go ahead and say, is where we have a level 1 severe risk for severe thunderstorms tomorrow. And of course, this naturally encompasses a little bit of Polk. I just didn't etch you all in there, even though I am a Polk resident myself. My wife and son are probably tuning in right now. At least I hope that they are. And we are going to be watching for that isolated bout of severe thunderstorms during the 4 to about 8 o'clock time frame tomorrow. We got to get a little bit of that juice to amp up during the first half of Saturday. And then once things really kick off, and we'll talk about the setup once we come back from our first 3-minute break, that's when I do think we'll have what are called pulse-like thunderstorms, where they quickly blow up and then they rain themselves out almost in the blink of an eye. You sometimes might even miss the initial development of them on radar if you really just aren't paying attention. So with that being said, I definitely ran late. I know that was almost like an intro as opposed to the first segment of the weather brief, but when we come back, start developing some of your questions. We'll take a look at the big picture pattern across Central Florida, what we have in store for us through this weekend, and then a look ahead at the month of March, because it does look like spring is going to fully settle in. Maybe we'll start to see more recurring bouts of rainfall and isolated thunderstorms as we go through the month of March, and then maybe an extension into the month of April as well, which harkens back to a story I wrote coming up on a month and a half, 2 months ago. We'll see how well that pans out, but don't go anywhere, folks. I'll be right back with you here momentarily. We're back. Oh, I haven't said that in a while. All right, welcome back to News 6 Weather at 9:30. We're going to get started talking all things weather pattern and then zeroing in on our beautiful sunshine state of Florida here. And I'll immediately get us over to the water vapor so I don't waste any more of your time. Let's break this down. The water vapor has a very interesting setup to it because we have not necessarily a strong push of cold air coming in from up north, but rather a small dose of it. And I'll go ahead and draw that in. If you look right in here, it's starting to blend with some of the dry air back behind the pulse that's bringing us all these showers and thunderstorms. But that right there is actually called a little cold pocket. I'll go and put cold PO there. What a cold pocket is a breakaway slot of cold, dry air way up in the atmosphere. And what that does, is we all know, whenever there's cold air over warm air, it kind of creates additional instability. It wants to start to create some mixing. That cold air wants to come down and the warmth wants to rise to replace it because it's a lot more buoyant and it's less dense. So what's happening here is, as that small little cool pool aloft comes down, we start to tap into a different moisture source. We have high pressure trying to build in off the east coast, high pressure ridging, and as a result, that clockwise flow is also hoping to channel some Caribbean moisture and warmth up from the south, pinching it right over top the Florida Peninsula, and this pattern's going to hang with us through the weekend. We may not see a full-fledged continuation of the showers and thunderstorms as we go through Sunday, but tomorrow looks a lot more stormy than today. Today was kind of the initial surge of subtropical and tropical moisture over our area. Then tomorrow, as all this stuff is left to marinate, kind of like when you take a cold steak out of the fridge and you let it come to room temperature before throwing it on the grill, that's kind of what's going to allow tomorrow's afternoon heating to create not only the sea breeze coming in on both of our coastlines, but also the thunderstorms that are more than likely going to pop off between 3 to 5 p.m. I'm really thinking that initiation, when things will start to form up out there, will occur between the hours of 3 to 4 p.m. local time. And I did notice that someone in the chat, Zachary Berger 7392, asks, how's it looking from 3 to 5:30 down near the Port St. Lucie area, if I'm not mistaken? That's when I'm thinking we're going to start to see things pushing in off the East Coast, as well as a little bit of ignition from just our general thunderstorms that could try to get a little bit more aggressive. Let me get rid of my pen tool and move on to that severe risk so we can take a look at that together. So right here is where we'll see what Storm Prediction Center has for us. And again, like I said, this is a very weird overlay, at least when zoomed in on Central Florida particularly. If I zoom us out and show you the peninsula, this actually makes a lot of sense because this is more of that textbook or classic spring/summertime severe thunderstorm setup when you take into the equation the amount of moisture that's being pumped in over our state, as well as the sea breezes that will be triggered once we get just beyond the warmest portions of the afternoon. And for a quick crash course for those of you who may not be as familiar as some other native Floridians, the sea breeze is essentially when the land becomes hotter than the waters around the peninsula. And right now, even though we've seen some warming up of the water temperatures on both of our coastlines, it won't be too difficult for the surface of the peninsula to become warmer than the waters around us. The shelf waters off the immediate beaches there are still fairly cool after a couple of those Arctic blasts that we had to deal with earlier this month and even at the end of January. So let's take you back in for a bird's eye view on Central Florida. I'll get my face out of the way so you can all see. Heavy rain is going to be an issue. We had some pretty good piling up of water in some spots today. And the reason I say pretty good is we haven't seen any flood advisories, let alone any flood warnings, thank God. Lightning, obviously, is going to be a frequent occurrence in those areas that do see the more developed thunderstorms. Gusty winds up to 50 miles an hour. I want to bump that up a little bit. I do believe it could be up to 60 miles an hour. Of course, encompassing that severe risk. Small but damaging hail is a potential, and again, praise Jesus. In this case, we don't have much of a tornado risk. I am still going to keep an eye on radar because once we start to get things popping and we're starting to battle not only the sea breeze coming in off the East Coast, but also those little outflow boundaries I'd mentioned earlier in the stream, that's when things can start to get a little spinny. They start to rotate. There was a thunderstorm I was tracking earlier that crossed the Florida Turnpike earlier today, and I noticed that once the East Coast sea breeze hit it, coupled with a cold pool that was coming in from the north, that thing took on a little bit of a tumbling appearance, and I didn't like it. When you looked at the velocities where you can look at the different colors, green and red, it definitely looked like it was trying to get a little rotation to it, but again, we managed to knock that puppy down. It really didn't have that vertical climb into the atmosphere to really produce anything negative, so yeah, we dodged that bullet, but I definitely wasn't a fan of it as I take that sigh of relief. Now, before we take our second break and I open up the floor to questions. Let's go hour by hour. This is specifically for tomorrow. Now, I will openly admit our in-house computer model, I think, is way too overcooked with what's happening right now. Our in-house model suggests that all of the Florida Peninsula is in for some very strong thunderstorms as we go between about 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. That's not happening. If I were to show you the live radar right now, as a matter of fact, the model is already out to lunch in that department because look at that. We've got one nice corridor of thunderstorms stretching down from the Kissimmee area down into, I want to say, the Lake Wales area of Polk County and a little further south from there. But otherwise, a lot of the overall swath of rain that we saw work its way into the peninsula earlier this evening has washed out. It's washed out almost altogether, and that's what I'm anticipating is going to continue between now and our 11 o'clock newscast and even beyond that. Just going to be watching that one band of stuff south of where you can see Kissimmee on the map because we still have a little bit of that low-level easterly wind that's going to try to fuel the updraft, which is what helps the thunderstorm keep how high it stays in the atmosphere. And the higher it stays, the greater chance it has of raining down on you heavier, producing stronger winds, and then maybe some of that small hail as well. But thankfully, we haven't seen any severe thunderstorms for the day today. All right, let's get back to the model. You can ignore what happens overnight. Into tomorrow, though, I think it has a very good handle on when things are going to start to initiate. If you look right around 2 o'clock, you can see those very small little pieces there, the small shades of green, yellow, the pockets there that begin to develop across the viewing area. That's when I think we're going to trigger the initial development of our next round of thunderstorms. And then by about 4 or 5 o'clock, that is when the stronger stuff is going to begin to build up. And once again, you can see here that this model really, I don't think, is handling very well. I should have probably pulled up the HRRR. You can see a lot of this stuff did form off into southeast Florida, closer to the Boca Raton, West Palm Beach area, but not much in our viewing area, and I think this might be a little cooked. I don't think it's handling the overall parameters very well, and I do anticipate we're still going to see some thunderstorms getting going through portions of Brevard, Osceola, and maybe easternmost Orange once that sea breeze does begin to come on in between the hours of 3 and 5 o'clock. There's going to be enough moisture, enough heating of the day to at least get something popping off, and then as I mentioned earlier, I really do think what we used to say in Air Force weather is we'll be under a pulse like setup where these thunderstorms won't be long lasting. They're going to shoot up very rapidly once they do develop, but then they'll rain down on top of you almost within the first 5 to 10 minutes of them really trying to get strong. Now, I'm going to take another break. When we come back, have some questions ready to rock and roll. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and then I'm going to jump over to the studio, get ready for our 10 p.m. show. But don't go anywhere. Refresh your drinks and snacks. I'll be right back with you. All right, welcome back to the final stretch of News 6 weather at 9:30. I'm going to pull something up as you all load your questions in the chat for me really quick. I'm starting to see some special weather statements popping up on my radar app on my phone, which tells me that we are starting to see the atmosphere stabilizing. Not quite seeing much on this. This is going to be our fog tracker because, believe it or not, National Weather Service has just issued a dense fog special weather statement up for our northern counties from about Palm Coast, getting down into the Daytona Beach area, Ocala, the Villages, and Gainesville. In fact, I should be able to pull up our Daytona Beach camera to see if we're seeing anything out there right now. And then I'll take a quick glance over and see if you have any questions for me before we wrap up. Let's see. Oh, yeah, kind of a little bit. It looks like there's a little bit of fog starting to blossom out there. Nothing too much. Either that or it's just water on the lens. It could be either or. But regardless, the fog building in tells me that the atmosphere is stabilizing. Once you get fog down just about at ground level where we are, that tells me that all the energy that was available for thunderstorms to blow up has completely dissipated, or it's been taken alive by the thunderstorms that initially took over in the first place. Marky D48, it depends on where you are. We've already seen upwards of 2+ inches in some spots out there in Central Florida, and a lot of it really occurred near Gainesville and Ocala earlier tonight, where we just had a consistent feed of heavier rainfall without the strong stuff. Tomorrow, I think we're going to shift gears. We had a lot of rain pile up in northern Central Florida. I think tomorrow is going to be more of a lower Four Corners counties, Brevard, and then further south into the southern Florida peninsula, where we'll see some of that daytime stuff ignite. Melissa Riley, you're very welcome. Let's see if we can find anything on our current visibility before we wrap up. Oh, yeah, there you go. A little bit of it. Definitely trying to get in there. So maybe we did spot some of the fog on the camera up there. Palm Coast and Daytona Beach starting to see their visibility coming down. Kissimmee and Orlando, maybe Orlando is seeing some fog right now, but Kissimmee is most definitely still that corridor there, that stretched out line of thunderstorms. That's why the visibility has dropped down there. I don't count that as fog, but we'll probably continue to see fog developing across the viewing area tonight once we get a lot of this rainfall to really cool down the surface of our environment. Jody, yes, absolutely. It's not going to put a substantial dent in our drought, especially since the entire state of Florida now is under a level of drought, whether it be your standard drought, I know that sounds silly, a moderate drought, or an extreme drought. There's a good majority out there under extreme drought conditions, and I'm very excited to say that some of the heavier rainfall fell into those areas afflicted by extreme drought. So that's a very, very good chunk of news to pass along to you. We got a lot of the rainfall today without any of the strong stuff. Now, hopefully we can do it again tomorrow, but I'd be lying to you if I said that we were less conducive tomorrow for stronger thunderstorms than we were today. It's more than likely flipped. I think tomorrow we'll have a better shot at seeing some isolated strong to severe storms versus today. But all right, everybody, that's all she wrote. I'm going to go ahead and cut the stream. I'm going to run next door into the studio. If you have the means of tuning in for our 10 p.m. live discussion or newscast, 10 p.m. newscast, or even the 11 o'clock newscast, you'll catch us live here at News 6. I'll be talking weather on the studio side of things, headed out from the Digital Weather Center. But if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section down below. Upon the conclusion of this live discussion, I'll go ahead and check back tomorrow once I get in for my evening shift, especially since that's when I think we'll be rocking out there with some of the worst weather. And we'll talk to you again soon. Not too sure when I'll be filling in once again, but it was great to talk weather with everybody tonight. I hope you helped, or you hope you got some useful information from this to help plan your weekend, and we'll see just how much rain we can get on the immediate horizon and how much more of it will be coming for the month of March. But until next time, folks, you know the drill. This is the Digital Weather Center, signing out.